Hi, my name's Alaina and I'm a PhD student at Queen's University Belfast. But prior to my studies, I was working at RZSS Edinburgh Zoo. So I may have met some of you over the years. So most of my work at RZSS was to do with education and research. And so you may see some RZSS things kind of popping up within this talk today as well. So it's slight bias. But I have included other collections as well, and it is a broader survey that we're going to be talking about. So the title is Connecting to Zoo, the who, how, and why we stayed connected to zoos during COVID times. And it has been a difficult time, as we're all very much aware that zoos have had to close their doors to their visitors since the beginning of March 2020, which has made it extremely difficult to kind of have these connections happening. And the word kind of connection and connectedness and connecting to animals and nature is a really popular concept in the zoo world. Again, all of you will be very familiar with this. But just for today, we'll just kind of look at one definition that kind of gets us all on the same page. And it was a definition that was put forward by Haggart et al. In '93. And they said that a person is feeling connected when they're actively involved with another person, animal group, or environment. And that involvement promotes a sense of comfort and well-being. And that's kind of something that I really want to look into a bit further. And we'll talk about that throughout the talk, and seeing how these connections can make people have a sense of comfort and well-being during the pandemic. When the doors to the zoos are open, we are very much aware of animal connections happening within the sites. This can be done through zoo exhibit design, interactions with the animals, interactions with the staff, and we're well aware these animal connections can happen in real life when the zoos and aquariums are open. We're also really aware of social connections happening within the zoo and aquarium setting. Most people visit with friends and family, and as you're walking around the zoo, you see these social connections happening. You see people enjoying these shared experiences, and these are really key, and they're kind of bonding and memory making that are happening within the facilities. But when zoos are closed, like, how can we possibly promote these feelings of connection with animals and amongst each other? And because all of you guys are working in the zoo world, you already know this answer. And it's through the provision of online content. And that's pretty much the way everything is going at the minute. That's how we're doing things, is online. And zoos have definitely taken part in a great expansion in their online content, like making really informative websites. The use of webcams has increased, and lots of different ways of staying connected with the animals is occurring through the online content. So really trying to get that sense of animal connection, again, with webcams, social media, being able to support the zoos, donating to feed the animals, joining with memberships, even if you can't actually go. People have been doing that during lockdown situations, just so they can keep that sense of animal connection. Zoos are also promoting social connections within households, so by providing education resources. Many of you may have been teaching your children at home, and I'm sure you've been using the zoo resources for your homeschooling. So there's a huge increase in the number of education resources that have been available from zoo and aquarium websites. And kind of beyond the household, social media is allowing people to, again, share stories from the zoo amongst their own social networks. So increasing their sense of social connection with their friends and family through the social media of the zoos and aquariums. So we know how zoos and aquariums are trying to promote this connection remotely, but are people using it? And if so, who are they, and why are they using it? So that's what this research is really going to look at in a little bit more detail. And these are the questions that we'll be able to answer a little bit, but we can further talk about at the end as well, if you like. So we'll kind of look at who has stayed connected, which zoos and aquariums are being connected to, how have they done it, why they did so, and then look at a little bit closer what benefits come from this connection. So we'll talk about that towards the end of the presentation. Before we get into the answers, I'll just tell you how I got this information and kind of where it came from. It was part of a larger online survey about animal connectedness, and it was just a small section that was included just because I was really interested in this topic. So I included a small section just so I can get a little bit more information about what was going on during the closures. It ran for about 6 months, and it was distributed on Facebook, loads of different social media and survey exchange sites. The participants were 18 plus, they spoke English, and they had visited a zoo aquarium in the past 5 years. Now, the point of that bit was that in the larger survey, they were talking about their last zoo experience and talking about animal connectedness that happened in their last zoo experience. So that's why it's within the past 5 years. And then to get to this question, it was really simple. Have you stayed connected with the zoo during closures? Yes or no? And if they said yes, they would have carried on to this section of the survey. So they were asked which zoo they stayed connected to. Some people just said 1, some people said 2, some people said 12 different zoos they stayed connected to. So it was open text box. They could say whatever they wanted and which ones. We're able to look at who they were, general demographics, age and gender and that type of thing, but also their kind of interest in animals was brought into this as well. And a further question about home composition, so were there children in the home or not, was added in, just again gain a better understanding of who was using the resources and staying connected to the zoos. As for the how and the why, there was a couple different kind of tick boxes that they could select. Visiting the websites, being on emailing lists, webcams, or they could actually just, again, write their own how they stayed connected. As for the why, again, there was a couple different options that I provided. So staying connected for their own interests in animals, or they were staying connected for the benefit of others in the home. And there was a variety of different answers that they could provide there. And again, there was another option, which a lot of people did use to kind of help explain why they had stayed connected. So this is basically what the methods were and how we got the data for this study. So for the WHO, out of 548 people that did the larger survey, 302 did stay connected to a zoo aquarium during the first lockdown, because that's when the data is from. And we're able to kind of look at who they were and predict from that, like 550 or so, which people were going to stay connected, and using a binary logistic regression, be able to look at kind of predictive factors that would say, okay, these are the type of people that would have stayed connected. Not surprisingly, people with a high interest in animals were going to be the ones that stayed connected. So they were likely to have some kind of zoo experience. Maybe they would have had a membership at some point. Most likely they had pets in the home. And like with many surveys, it was a large majority of females that were taking part in the survey, but were also the ones that were, again, more likely to stay connected. And within the age range, kind of 18 to 39 was the most prominent within the sample. So which zoos? This will be of interest to you guys for sure. So first, again, this was a survey that was available worldwide, and it was shared on my social media, but also that of Queen's University Belfast, and various other kind of social media platforms. Reddit was one that I started using that I'd not used before, and that's very popular in North America. So there is some bias in which zoos were selected, of course, again, it being an English-speaking survey and where it was shared, but you can see that Britain and Ireland zoos are coming up very popular for staying connected to. And out of the 302 people, 644 places were mentioned. So it was quite a few, and the large majority of that was Britain and Ireland. Now for the top BIAZA zoos that came up, that were mentioned, RZSS was mentioned 42 times, Chester Zoo 36, and so on. And again, there might be a little bit of bias again, because again, I shared it on my social media, but there is a good proportion of the rest of the BIAZA zoos being represented and mentioned and being used to stay connected to, which is nice to see. So the how people stayed connected, the most popular way was through social media, which is kind of really good to see. That the social media is being taken up by lots of people. Webcams has also become very popular as well. Education resources is definitely something that people are using as well. And visiting the website often was another one that came up as quite a popular thing. Donating to feed is pretty self-explanatory. 74 people in this study donated to feed, which was good. And then down over there's 65 people that said other. And those that provided more information, when they said other, they kind of said the how they stayed connected was basically through staying in contact with other staff within that zoo, or it was work related, or it was study related, and that's how they had stayed in contact with that zoo or aquarium. So being the zoo geek that I am, I got really interested in saying, okay, well, this is only 302 people, and I know that there's more people using Facebook and webcams and all that, so I want to know more. So I looked at a few of the other bits and pieces of this and the how, And I got in touch with a few other zoos to see, okay, well, can I know a little bit more about your analytics and your data about your resources and your webcams and your social media? So I was able to get some information on webcams. Not every zoo has webcams, but RZSS and Dublin Zoo both have webcams. So I asked them, and they saw huge increases in their monthly views with the webcams, with over 100,000 to 3 million views per month for RZSS, and from 10,000 to 100,000 for Dublin Zoo. So a huge, massive increase in the use of webcams, which was good to see. So people can't see the animals in real life, they're going to see them on the webcams. Facebook, so obviously every zoo has their own social media suite. Some use Twitter, some use Facebook, some use Instagram, and kind of getting a bit of information from each of those. Everyone has a bit of different analytics, but some of the information I was able to get that was consistent across the board was Facebook followers, because you can easily see the change in the number of Facebook followers. And from the end of 2019 to March 2021, we saw huge increases from North Carolina Zoo, which is in America, Two Oceans Aquarium, which is in South Africa, Dublin Zoo, RZSS, and Chester Zoo. And you can see with Chester Zoo, they saw a great increase with 112% increase in the number of Facebook followers that they had. Speaking to Charlotte from Chester Zoo, she said the main reason for this was most likely due to their live virtual zoo days, which were 15 to 20-minute live events on Facebook. And this showed everything from, tiger enrichment to a bit about, chameleons, and a little bit of behind the scenes and what goes on with caring for the animals. So that has saw like a huge increase in the Facebook followers for Chester Zoo. Again, because of my background working with education teams, I was very interested in the use of the education resources, because I know education teams put a lot of effort into creating these resources. So I wanted to see if there was an increase in the use of the education resources. And I got some information from RZSS Chester Zoo and North Carolina Zoo. And RZSS saw a 14-fold increase in the number of resource views that they had. Chester Zoo 6-fold increase, and North Carolina Zoo was 31-fold increase in the number of views that their education resources had accrued. Speaking to Beth from North Carolina Zoo, she said that they've created a great deal of online content, video series, living with nature, which they could use as a live session or pre-recorded. And they also had a whole series of videos called Adventures in Education. And those are proving to be very successful and a great deal of views. And as you can see, they got over 1 million views of these resources. So a great increase in the use of education resources over the past year or so. So back over to some of the research that I collected from this survey was the why. Again, I mentioned that I kind of gave people their own tick boxes for why they stayed connected. Their own reasons, of course, was the most popular reason. Of course, if you are interested in animals yourself, then that's why you stayed connected to zoos and aquariums. For others was actually for the benefit of others. So this might have been a parent that was staying in contact in order to use the education resources or the webcams or things like that. 76 people said it was something that they stayed connected because it was something the whole household enjoyed doing. And when I first thought about this, I thought this is going to be mainly parents again. The parent enjoys it, but they're doing it for the whole household. But with the whole household, half of those people didn't have kids in the home. So it might have just been a professional couple that, both of those people enjoyed staying connected with zoos, or it could have been maybe a student accommodation and all the people in that student accommodation enjoyed staying connected to zoos together. The other most popular answer for why people were staying connected was to use for chat. And it was they enjoyed using the information from the zoos and aquariums as chat with their family and friends during Zoom calls and things like that. So that was good that they were using this information to kind of enhance their social connectedness by using this, which was interesting to see. And then there's 25 people stated other. And then again, they were allowed to kind of write a bit more about what that other was. And again, it was quite linked to being work related, and they had stayed connected because somebody, a zoo friend, worked there and they like to help each other out. So again, it was very showing the close-knit relationships that zoo staff and volunteers have with each other, and that's why they were staying connected. So what does all this kind of tell us about the benefits of animal connections? And again, kind of stating the obvious first, is someone who's interested in animals wants to find a way to satisfy this interest if they're not able to go see them in real life. You may have heard of the term biophilia, and basically that just means it's people's innate tendency to look for connections with nature and animals. And like with any human trait, their sense of biophilia is greater in some than others. So most likely people with a high sense of biophilia are satisfying this need by staying connected with zoos and aquariums. So it's kind of a psychological benefit, making us kind of really satisfying our interests in that sense. But there can be a physiological benefit as well. There's been a bit of research done in the States by Michigan State University, and they studied a stress relief effect by watching animals in a zoo. So what they had done, they stressed out people in a lab setting, and then they hooked them up to various machines, testing heart rate, blood pressure, skin conductance, and looking at the stress response. And this decreased, all of these decreased when they were watching the live zoo animals in Detroit Zoo. They then did the same study with just watching videos of the zoo animals. And again, the stress responses had decreased just by watching the videos of the zoo animals as well. So it could be that the 51% of the people in this study that were watching the webcams were actually having some kind of stress relief from watching the animals during the pandemic. And this is a really good source of stress relief for them. Interestingly, when I told one of my colleagues about this, he's like, yeah, I totally get that, because during lockdown, when him and his girlfriend were feeling stressed, the one would say to the other, go get the sloth videos, and they would watch sloth videos to de-stress. So that was really interesting. So I don't have that in the data, but it was a really interesting thing that he had told me. I was like, oh, that's great. So this is happening in real life. So it was interesting to hear from him, and I had to put the sloth picture in there to remind me to tell you about that. The other side of things that can be happening is the people that are choosing to donate to feed the animals could be having a sense of happiness and helpfulness coming to them because they've done this. And there has been research that states that there's actually a neural link between generosity and happiness. So these 25%, I think it was 74 people, may have gained some happiness and feelings of helpfulness once they've donated to feed the animals. And again, you guys are in the zoo world, so you probably know there has been a huge outpouring of generosity from zoo visitors. Just as an example, we can see over 31,000 people had donated to help Dublin Zoo, and that gained over 2.8 million euros to help care for the animals there. So if you have stats from your zoos, you can pop them into the chat, and I can look at after, just see how many people have donated and how much money you've raised, just out of zoo geekdom. So yeah, and more interesting stats to throw in next time I give a talk like this. So it could be, yeah, these people are feeling really happy about being able to help, even though they can't physically go there and support them financially. They can do it online, which is good. And so the animal connections can then also stimulate social connections. We saw that 108 people chose they stayed connected because they liked using the information from the zoos and aquariums in chats with family and friends. And 63% of those who stated this said that they had some kind of zoo experience as well. So one woman had said, you know, as I work there, family and friends, they all look to her to see how the animals are doing in the time of crisis. And this will kind of promote her feelings of social connection in a couple of different ways. So one, she's sharing her passion and her interest in the animals, and the people that she's speaking to would have that shared interest as well. So they're sharing that kind of information amongst each other. And then it would also be the fact that she would feel valued in these social relationships because she was able to provide this information to a friend or a family member. And so that is another way that you kind of enhance your sense of social connection through these valued relationships. Another interesting side note about the people who chose to use the information for chat, 70% had no children in the home. And I just found that interesting. So it was nice to see. Well, basically, I know when I speak to my parents, all they want to know about is the kids. So if you don't have kids in the home, you have other interesting things to talk about. You can talk about what's going on in the zoo world. You can talk about something that is not related to children. So that was just a little interesting thing to look at as well. So the animal connection can also stimulate social connections within the home. So that was just a bit of beyond the household. and speaking to friends and family through Zoom and phone calls and chats and things like that. But within the household, again, we're going to go back to the idea of the children in the home and the education resources. So a good proportion of the people who said they stayed connected for the benefit of the whole household, or something the whole household enjoyed doing. A good proportion of them did have children in the home, and just less than half were using the education resources. So it could be they were literally using the education resources, which were in the kind of whole category education resources. But they might have actually been using webcams as well, but that wasn't captured in that statistic there. So it could be they're using more than just the education resources with the whole household. So when people are using the education resources, they'd be able to use these different activities and being able to kind of enjoy a bit of like family time. And again, a lot of people's learning was done at home and done in a group setting. And people were all learning together and doing these different activities and promoting closeness and kind of communication within the house. And I have just a small little collage there from RZSS that shows some of the resources that were on offer and that people had taken photos of and sent back to RZSS, showing that they were using the resources. And these are definitely kind of group activities where you have families baking together and creating different crafts. And you have the one on the picture at the bottom where the adult and the child are pretending to be penguins in the back garden. So these are very much social activities that are being encouraged by these education resources that are on offer from the zoos and aquariums. So in summary, many people are choosing to stay connected to zoos and aquariums during closures, which is great. Social media and webcams are the most popular method of staying connected. And people are connecting for their own interest in animals, but it's not just that. They are doing it for social reasons as well. And the animal connectedness can offer a form of stress relief for people and a sense of enjoyment. And it also enhances these social connections within the household and beyond the household as well, which then, of course, can promote a sense of comfort and well-being during these difficult times. So if you were really interested in this talk and in this subject, I recently published a small piece in BIAZA News. So if you want to read more about the research and what went on, please feel free to have a look at that. Or if you have any questions, you can ask now, or if you want to email me later, then my email address is there as well for you, or message on Twitter as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.
Hey, Alaina, can I jump in with a quick one? How are you?
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah, sorry if you answered this because I jumped off for a moment to take a phone call. But are there any plans to sort of continue this and see how it changes, as COVID perhaps diminishes somewhat, or is there any scope to do that?
I haven't yet, because I'm trying to think about my next study, which this was just a side thing because again, I'm a zoo geek. I was like, ooh, I should ask that. So I don't have any plans to continue it at the moment, but that might change as things go on. And with the PhD, obviously it's an ever-changing thing because my original studies were in person talking to people, but that's completely changed to all online stuff at the minute. So I don't have any set plans to continue now, but that might change in future.
Sure, it's really interesting, and it'll be fascinating to see how that continues. Maybe we can collar a likely student somewhere to do that as well and pick this up. Who knows? Anyway, thank you for that. It's really interesting.
Thank you.